What's up guys, Gaonan here, and welcome to episode 4 of Drafting to Masters. If you missed episode 2 or 3, I've included the links in the top right corner of this video. I started this series because I wanted to share my draft knowledge and have some fun. Every month since the release of Fall of Argenport, I've been in the top 50 Masters at the end of the month, and I do it having about a 60% win rate. I hope my videos can help someone else make the climb to Masters. I also love talking about Eternal and helping others, so feel free to add me in game using the above tag. Without further ado, let's get into the draft. For a first pick, I think this is pretty obvious that we'll pick Sheriff Marley here. Nerfed Sheriff's hat is not as good as it once was, and there aren't any super exciting commons to pick from, so pretty easy Sheriff Marley here. This pack's a little more interesting. At the uncommon, we have Linebreaker Shield, we have Wildfire Sensari. At the commons, we have Silverwing Purge Leader and Illumination Wisp. I think Linebreaker Shield is probably the strongest card, a little bit more splashable than Sensari is, but we could be in Rakano and Sensari is pretty decent too. Given that we already have a 4-drop, I don't really want to take the 5-drop on top of that, so I prefer the Linebreaker Shield here, which I think is stronger than both the common choices we have as well. Next, not anything in the uncommon slot that we're particularly excited about. Guard Dog is a good common, Sky Crew is a good common. I'm going to go with Guard Dog because I prefer the more aggressive card at this point. Sky Crew could be something we want to pick up later. Lots of Justice cards continuing to come through. There's also a Cabal Standard, and noteworthy that there are no Primal cards in the pack. So we might not, end up in Huru or anything like that. If that's the case, I think Cabal Standard is probably the pick here. It's a very good trick, obviously when you're being aggressive, so I think I prefer it over Purge Leader at this point. Justice is continuing to come through. Encouragement is a weird spell because it's not a fast spell. That'll definitely trip you up one time if you don't read the card carefully, but can be a finisher. Feral Spiteling is not good in Argenport because it's more for the Wisp Radiant strategy, which is Xenon only. And the other Justice cards aren't very exciting, so I am going to take Encouragement here. This pick, we've got Miner's Canary, we've got Entangling Vines, Read the Stars. So there are some Primal cards coming through, they're not particularly strong. Miner's Canary is good at holding the ground early on in the game, pretty much stops everything early game. And if they use a trick to get through it, all the better for you. I'm actually going to take Entangling Vines here. I like the tempo it provides. I like the extra value you can get from warping it off the top of your deck. No, it's not a fast spell, but still interesting and can finish off some games as well. Only Fire and Primal cards here. Trumpeter is an okay 2-drop. Arachnodon is a pretty good finisher. And Fissure is solid. Hot Blood Barbarian is good as well. I'm going to pick the Trumpeter here just to get an early 2-drop. There's potential for Yeti synergies in pack 2 and 3, so I like getting Yetis early. Sewer Sludge is actually pretty good, can consistently grow throughout the game, can consistently get to a 3-4 I would say, and given that we have Cabal Standard, not unreasonable to pick it here. Wow, only Shadow cards coming through. I'd say the strongest one is Hair Trigger Pistol, so I'll pick that up here. This draft has been all over the place. We have cards coming from all factions, and it's hard to get any read on what we're truly getting from this first pack. I'd say the strongest card here is probably Final Shot, but I'm probably not going to play any of these cards since I don't have any other cards in these factions so far. I'll take Spore Breath, I might play it. And Sorcerer is fine. Before we get into pack 2, just looking over what we've gotten so far, it's hard to say where we're at. Obviously, we're not in time, so that's easy to, leave off, but otherwise, we're pretty wide open at this point. And I think right now our Justice is probably the strongest thing we have going for us, followed by our Shadow. But I really do like Linebreaker's Shield, so we might be in Huru. So at the moment, I'm going to take out these red cards and just kind of focus on these 3 colors and see where the draft takes us. As far as this pick, Silverwing Familiar wears weapons very well in both Shadow and Huru, so whether we end up in Huru or Argenport, we have some weapons for the Silverwing Familiar to wear already, so I'm encouraged to take this Silverwing Familiar here. Could also take the Yeti Snowslinger as a solid 2-drop. Snowballs are relevant, but I think I'm going to take the more powerful Silverwing Familiar at this point, given that we had the chance to get more weapons. Some pretty strong cards here. I like Battlefield Scavenger, even though we don't have any Valkyries yet. Direward Prowler is also very good, gives you some needed gas in the late game. There's also a Slope Sergeant, which is nice for those Yeti synergies. But I think Dark Return is the best card, and the one I'm going to pick here. Katra is all in on the Life Force deck. Not something I'm going to do in this draft. Don't have any way to splash this yet, and it's not really splashable because it's got double time influence, so mostly looking at Cabal Bludgeoner and Minotaur Oathkeeper here. We want weapons for Silverwing Familiar, so that incentivizes us to pick the Bludgeoner as well, since he likes weapons too. But I'm going to go for the Oathkeeper here just for the overall stronger card and curve consideration at this point. We're more likely to see another Bludgeoner, I think. Extinguish is a solid removal. Island's Choice is also pretty strong. We're still kind of bouncing back and forth between Argenport and Huru at this point, and Mirror Image is okay too, but I think Extinguish is the pick here. We're leaning more and more towards the Shadow with the Dark Return and the Hair Trigger Pistol and Cabal Standard. I'm pretty excited to keep going into Shadow rather than leaning solely on this Linebreaker Shield for our Huru game. Moonlit Gargoyle is a strong card and one that I'm happy to see here. Unseen Agent keeps the night going so that we can keep Moonlight Gargoyle in the air, and it's just a way to get free damage in a board stall situation. So I like Unseen Agent here. I don't think I have any gunslingers yet, but Triggerman is still good, wears weapons well, lines up with the plan for potentially, having lots of weapons to make Silverwing Familiar relevant. Slumbering Stone is a great pickup. Chump blocker that turns into a flyer is always nice. None of these cards are going to be in our deck, so just kind of autopilot picks here. A really late Dark Return, happy to get this. A second late Dark Return, this is insane. And a Gunslinger to help bond out Triggerman pretty early, so I like Flashy Duelist here. So right now I'd say we're firmly in Argenport. I'm going to cut these primal cards so that we can focus ourselves, and in this first pick of pack 3 I'm liking Frontier Confessor a lot. So we have Spore Breath and Extinguish so far for removal, but we also want it to be night so that we can keep Moonlit Gargoyle in the air, and that's kind of anti-synergy with Entrapment. So I'm happy to pick up Confessor here. So right now we only have 11 bodies. I'm not super concerned about that count. The thing I don't like about Headsman's Axe is that you have to have guys in the void to make it meaningful, so I don't love that. So I'm leaning between Strength of Many, Stalker, and Destroyer. We only have 2 3-drops and 2 4-drops, so I think Xenon Destroyer is probably going to make more sense here. Plays really well with Hair Trigger Pistol, so happy to pick it up here. Wow. Stand Together coming through, Arc Record Keeper coming through, so very strong time and justice cards. Don't have any way to splash for those, sadly, so just going to pick this Waystone since we have plenty of playables at this point. Another way for us to keep it night so we can keep Moonlit Gargoyle in the air. Here I think Strength of Many makes sense. Crown Watch Legionnaire is not my favorite card, isn't aggressively statted enough, so I much prefer Strength of Many. Of course, now we get 2 banners, which would have helped us splash that Stand Together, but I think it's okay that we didn't take it there. Just going to take this Desperado and keep the draft moving along. Another Extinguish is a really nice pickup for us, so we'll take that. Don't think either of these cards are going to be in our deck, so just going to pick Umbran Coaxer here. Bright Mace Paladin is always nice to have. Infused Strike is an okay trick, but I like Paladin more. Cover of Darkness is a legitimate finisher in this type of a deck, so happy to take it. Another Unseen Agent is very good for us. And these are kind of autopilot picks. The collector in me wants to take this Scale Seeker. I don't have any of these in my collection yet, but the Disciplined Drafter in me is looking at this Magenta Wisp and this Lethrai Blade Whirl. Wisp is a solid 2-drop, and we don't have a lot of 2-drops right now that are very good, so I think Magenta Wisp makes sense. However, Blade Whirl makes a lot of sense as far as the plan to suit up this Silverwing Familiar or these Unseen Agents to continue hitting the opponent that way. So, tough decision here. I'm going to take the Magenta Wisp just because it has some added flexibility and it's a 2-drop, which we are in need of. So, tough call, but got to be disciplined here. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, and 2-drops. So not as concerned about that this time around. Don't need to take this Back Alley Delinquent. So happy to take Blade Whirl here and finish out the draft. I'm happy to see another Blade Whirl here, and I'm going to take it. Shadow Stalker also makes a lot of sense in our deck. We've got Nightfall triggers on quite a few cards at this point, so making another unit unblockable that we can put weapons on and, buff up with the Lethrai Blade Whirl makes a lot of sense. I'm going to go for the unconditional removal and cut ties here. I think it's better than all the other cards. This is a really late living example. Ruination Sledge coming through too, so it's possible we should have been Rakano in this deck, but I've been pretty happy with how the draft is going. Gonna take Territorial Elf, not my favorite card to play, but maybe we're aggressive enough to make it work. Another Sewer Sludge over Coronal Umbran. We only have 1 Wisp and Magenta Wisp, so doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to take Umbran here. Gonna be happy to take Sludge and hopefully get it up to a 3-4 and make it worthwhile. So we've got enough 2-drops. I don't think we need to take the Miner's Canary. I'm going to take this Baton here. I usually don't love to play it because of the double justice, but it can deal with some flyers, sometimes get you a 2-for-1, so I'll take it here. Another Hair Trigger Pistol is really good for us. Not super excited about Crown Watch Recruiter. Probably won't play it, but only card for us here. Canary is the only card, and Death Strike. We have a very high unit count. Dark Returns basically double his units, so going to be looking there first to cut make some cuts, and then we'll probably look at some of the spells as well. So unit wise, I like Oathkeeper, I like the Sludges, I like the Stone. Flashy Duelist I'm not super excited about. It would really only be to play Triggerman, and I probably am not playing that either. I'm probably cutting Triggerman, Coaxer. Those are probably the only 5-drops I want to play, so that means Flashy Duelist is out as well. So let's look at some of these spells real quick. As far as tricks, we've got Strength of Many and Cabal Standard. We don't... Encouragement, not as good a finisher as Cover of Darkness is, so I'm going to take the Encouragement out and rely on the Cover of Darkness as my finisher. Probably not going to play the Spore Breath. With the Dark Returns, we're going to not have as many units in the Void because we're going to be bringing them back. So, going to have to rely on the Extinguish and the Cut Ties instead. Given that we are going to have a decent amount of Nightfall in our deck, it might be right to cut out Reinforced Baton because it'll be harder to get that 2-for-1, so I'm going to take that out. And then we need to make a few more unit cuts and we'll be good to go. So our 4 and 5 drops are fine. Where I'm looking for cuts is either in the 1, 2, or 3 drop slot. Like I've said before, I'm not super excited about Territorial Elf, but could be good with Hair Trigger Pistol. But that can be said for a lot of the cards in our deck. Definitely playing the Magenta Wisp, and I'm going to play both of the Unseen Agents, so I'm going to cut the Territorial Elf. And then beyond that, I think I need to look at one of these 3 drops. And the cut is either going to be this Bright Mace Paladin or this Guard Dog, I think. Maybe even Xenon Destroyer. Yeah, actually I think Xenon Destroyer makes sense to get out of here. So this would put us at 17 power. I think it makes sense given the deck. We don't have a ton of flood protection. The only thing we're going to be doing late game with extra power is activating Sheriff Marley. Otherwise, the only other expensive things we really have are the Hair Trigger Pistol, the Cover of Darkness, and the Cut Ties. So I think 17 power for this deck makes sense. So let's get the power added. So we've got the Waystone, and then the rest can just be regular old power. Do we have any double justice cards? We have Sheriff Marley, which is double justice, so a 10-7 split maybe makes sense. Makes me a little nervous, but we do have Desperado and Shadow Stalker at double Shadow, as well as Moonlit Gargoyle and Hair Trigger Pistol, so I think we need to lean pretty heavily towards the Shadow, and this looks about right. So this deck is pretty interesting because we're relying on Unblockable and Nightfall to finish off games more than Flyers, even though we do have the Silverwing Familiar. We've got some good late game power with Dark Return, we've got some decent removal, some okay attachments, and a couple of tricks, so this deck could really go either way. I'm very interested to see how it does. I also just want to say thank you for joining me on this 4th episode. I hope you guys are enjoying the content. If you are, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. That's important to do because I can only post a couple of times to the Eternal subreddit every week, so the only way to make sure you know when the content goes live is either following me on YouTube, following me on Twitter, because I always tweet out when my videos go live and everything like that, so I hope you choose to do so. Next, we'll get into the games and see how the deck does.